I'm shaking as I type this out, so please pardon any mistakes that I make because I'm literally losing my mind right now. Also, forgive me if I go off tangent and start rambling because, yeah, I'm freaking out over what's going on. I, 28, female, am supposed to get married to my boyfriend, 29, of 3 years in just 8 weeks. We were going to get married later, but we decided to get the wedding done earlier than planned because I'm pregnant. I'm 6 weeks in, and my boyfriend and I are definitely going to have this baby. We're in a good place right now financially, and we feel ready for marriage and kids. We don't earn a lot, but we're comfortable, is what I'm trying to say. I'm a graphic designer, and my boyfriend is the head of marketing at a good company, so we make enough money and would be able to cover the cost of raising a child. We'd have to downsize our wedding considerably, though, and wouldn't be able to have the dreamy destination wedding that we'd always wanted. I did feel a little upset about it initially, but I got over it soon enough because the joy of being pregnant overtook everything else, honestly. Nobody knows about the pregnancy apart from our immediate families, and we intend on keeping it this way until after the wedding. It's not like we're against the idea of people having kids before marriage, but we've been together long enough and we don't want any judgmental questions during the wedding itself, so we've decided to keep the pregnancy under wraps until we're married. My parents were ecstatic when I told them, and so were his. Just how it should be. Things were going so well up until a week ago when my girlfriends and I were hanging out at a restaurant, a little out of town because we wanted a relaxing trip, and the place we'd picked was an hour away from the city. It was quiet and relaxing and even had a spa right beside it, which was ideal. So we drove all the way there and had a really fun day. After we were done at the spa, I decided to take back some food from the restaurant for my boyfriend as well while my friends waited for me in the car. I was waiting in the restaurant, and that's when I saw my dad walk in with a woman I thought I recognized, and a woman around my age walked behind them talking on the phone. I'd seen my dad, but he hadn't seen me. I had no idea what he was doing so far from home, especially with two unknown women. They did look familiar, but I just couldn't place them. Out of curiosity, I decided to follow him onto the rooftop where he was sitting and tried to be as secretive about it as possible. I watched him take a seat, smiling happily and talking to the older woman really animatedly. I was trying my very best to make sense of it all because I just didn't want to believe that my dad would be having an affair. But there was no more denying it when I saw him plant a kiss on the woman's cheek and hold her hand while staring lovingly into her eyes, just like he used to do with my mother. Even the younger woman, who seemed to be around my age, had kept her phone aside and was smiling at them. I felt like I was going to throw up when I saw that and stood up abruptly from my chair. And unfortunately, the chair fell back and made a huge racket. That meant that all eyes were on me all of a sudden, including my dad's. I still don't know who was more mortified. His eyes looked like they were going to pop out of their sockets, while the other two women just looked very confused. I could feel my face growing hot, but thankfully a waiter came by just then and told me that the food I'd ordered was packed and ready to go. Thankfully, I'd already paid, so I grabbed the food and made a run for it. I got into the car and told my friends to drive back home as soon as they could. They seemed a little scared by the intensity of my voice and kept trying to get me to talk throughout the ride home, but I kept quiet. I was still trying to process what I just witnessed because I truly had no idea what to make of anything. My dad had been cheating on his wife, and it looked like it had been going on for a really long time, judging by the level of comfort that they shared. I didn't know what to say to my friends, or even if I could share something like this with them in the first place. They're nice people, no doubt about that, but this was just too huge. I hadn't even told them I was pregnant, and the secrets were just piling up. So to explain my behavior, I just told them that I'd taken a pregnancy test in the restaurant restroom and I'd found out that I was pregnant. They were thrilled for me on the ride home, and I was able to explain my strange behavior. I even put on a smile and pretended to be all right so they wouldn't push it further, but on the inside, I felt nauseated and disgusted. As soon as I got home, I didn't even bother to talk to my boyfriend and headed straight to the shower. I think I must have spent at least an hour there because coming out of the shower would mean having to confront the reality of the situation, and I just didn't know if I was ready for that. It was only when my boyfriend knocked on the door of the restroom to ask me if I was all right that I finally came out. And as soon as I saw him standing out there looking really concerned, I broke down almost immediately. I ended up telling him through sobs everything that I'd seen, and he was just as dumbstruck as I'd been. He didn't say much, but just consoled me and let me cry myself to sleep. The next few days were just me trying to pull myself together and contemplating when I should tell my mother. I texted my dad right after the restaurant incident that he had to tell her or else I would, but he hadn't, and neither had I, because I just didn't have the courage. This would break her marriage, and more importantly, it would shatter her on a personal level. My parents had been high school sweethearts, so this was just something that I don't think my mother would be able to deal with at this age. She's already a really emotional and fragile woman, so I stayed quiet for the next few days and ignored all the calls and texts from my dad because I had nothing to say to him anymore. I didn't even want to know what he had to say in his defense. I'd seen what I'd seen, and there was no taking it back. He'd ruined our family, and I just didn't want to hear anything from him. But then yesterday he decided to show up at my house to talk to me because I hadn't responded to him. I didn't even want to let him in, but he practically was begging, so I had to. My boyfriend just sat there quietly without a word, and I didn't even tell him to leave. Neither did my dad, which seemed a bit strange, because this felt a little too personal for him at least. He then told us that he was well aware of the impact of what he'd done, but there was more to it than whatever I'd seen, and begged me not to judge him based on just that. He then explained his past with the woman, and that just made the situation worse. He confessed that he'd been seeing this woman for the last 15 years, and the reason the woman and her daughter looked so familiar was because her daughter used to go to school with me. She was a year junior to me, but I'd seen her around, and I'd also seen her mother. She was a single mother, and my dad met her at one of my school events. They got along really well, and before they knew it, he was having a full-fledged affair with her behind our backs. She was a single mother, so she wasn't too worried. And even though she knew about my dad's existing family, she didn't care. They fell in love, and even her daughter was all right with it. And why wouldn't she be? My dad was loaded, and she could count on him to buy her whatever she wanted, even though she wasn't his daughter. It was definitely an upgrade from being the daughter of a single mother who worked as a hairdresser. But he hadn't even told us the worst of it yet. He told us that he'd wanted to end the affair a year in because he didn't want to break my mother's heart. But the only reason he stayed was because his mistress got pregnant. They had the kid, and he's almost 12 years old now, but I didn't see him that day because he was sick and had stayed home. So there it was, all out in the open. No more secrets between me and my dad anymore. I don't know why he told us more than what we needed to know, but it made sense when he got to the actual purpose of his visit. He told us that he was being completely honest and transparent with us because he wanted us to know that his hands were tied. He had no other option back then and did what he had to because he couldn't just abandon one woman for the other. For 15 years he was able to keep his other family a secret from us, and even though I knew about it now, he wanted me to keep it a secret from my mother. Not because he was scared that she might leave him, but because he was scared that she might do something to herself because of the heartbreak. He said that he loved us all equally, and he wanted me to understand that before I did anything. He knew that I loved my mother and didn't want to hurt her, which is why he was offering me a deal to keep this secret between us to prevent any unnecessary heartache for my mother. I didn't think it'd be that big a deal, and I was ready to decline even before he'd said anything. But then he said that he would be willing to pay for my future kids' education for his entire life if I kept this a secret from him. He said that he already had funds set aside for all his kids, but since his mistress's daughter never went to college, he has that put aside as well. So that money plus every single dollar that we'd ever need to spend on our child's education would be paid for by my dad, if and only if we agreed never to tell my mother about his whole family. He told me that he'd already talked to his lawyer about this and he had the papers ready. All it needed was our signature. My boyfriend and I have been struggling with this dilemma ever since my dad left. We told him that we'd think about it, but I don't know how I can agree to this deal without feeling like the worst daughter in the world. The fact that I'm even considering this makes me feel awful, as if I'm doing something horrible to my mother, which I am. So I guess it's not that weird to feel bad right now. It's just that I really do love my mother, but the fact that all my child's educational expenses will be looked after for the rest of his life is just insane to even think of. I can't imagine how much money we'll save, and I'm sure that my dad can actually afford it. He's the CEO and founder of his own company, so he has a crap load of money and doesn't need to worry about what he gives away. I just don't know what to do right now. I know the morally right and ethical thing would be to tell my mother everything, but as much as I hate to admit it, my dad's concerns aren't all unfounded. She's old and delicate now, and I can't imagine her taking this news well at all. What she'll never find out will never hurt her either, and my boyfriend and I will save a ton of money in the future as well. But deep down, I know that the fact that I'm even considering any of this is messed up. I really don't want to hurt my mom, but neither do I want to be a fool or make a bad decision. WIBTA if I agreed to the deal that my dad offered? Update 1. Some of you seem to be confused about certain things that I've said. I said that my mother won't be able to handle the heartache at her age, so I feel like I need to specify her age for it to make sense. My mother is 57, my dad is 59. I think that does qualify as old because they're both almost 60. My mother was diagnosed with hypertension a few years ago, so it's not as if she's in the peak of her health either. And I mean it when I say she doesn't have the emotional capacity to handle news like this. I'm not kidding, she might actually have a heart attack, or even worse, she might do something to herself on purpose. So even apart from the deal, there's a solid reason for me to think twice before telling her the truth. There's also been some confusion regarding why exactly I even have to worry about money and my expenditure if my dad's as rich as I say he is. And that's a valid question, so I think I'll explain what kind of person my dad is and how I've been brought up. Here's the thing about my dad. He's totally self-made, and that's how he's raised me to be. Of course, he paid for my education and gave me whatever I needed, but he didn't spoil me. I mean, I did splurge occasionally, but even that would be very, very rare. After I graduated from college, he told me that I was on my own now, and he wouldn't help me out even if I was broke, because he didn't want people to think that I was just a spoilt rich brat. And despite my current relationship with him, that really did instill a sense of responsibility in me. I don't know if it was the right thing to say to me as a parent, but I'd say that on a personal level, it did help me. Maybe it wouldn't be the right thing for someone else, but that's beside the point. After college, I've worked hard enough to get to a position where I get paid well enough for the work that I do, even though I'm in the creative field where employees are criminally underpaid. I guess being the daughter of such a well-respected industrialist gives me an edge. I've also graduated from one of the best design schools in the country, and I think I'm quite talented as well, so I earn well. And a lot of people think that after my dad passed away, I'll be his successor anyway, so all his money will eventually be mine. While that may happen, it certainly won't be the case if I do decide to tell my mother the truth. He will definitely write me out of his will, and someone else, probably his stepdaughter and his son, will inherit the company and all his property instead. He didn't say this explicitly, but I'm not stupid enough to believe that my dad wouldn't want to settle scores with me if I go against him. I know he's my own father, but he's always been cutthroat when it comes to money. And I think anyone in his position would have to be, because you never get to the top without stepping on some backs. I'm not defending it, but it's just a fact of life, honestly. The point is, I'm screwed. I just don't see a way out of this where I don't inevitably break my mother's heart. I don't even know if there is a right thing to do anymore, because it all just feels so messed up right now. My boyfriend thinks that I should tell my mother and we'll deal with the consequences later, which just goes to show what an incredible human being he is. I feel like I don't even deserve someone like him, and I'm so lucky that he decided to be with me in spite of all my flaws. My boyfriend didn't grow up rich like me, and I know that what my dad was offering would mean the world to him. But despite his personal feelings, he believes in doing the right thing, no matter how much easier it would be to just shut up and take the deal. He hasn't pressured me into doing anything and says that whatever decision I make will be final, since this is my family after all, and I'll know what to do better than him. He's even promised that he won't judge me no matter what I decide, which is just so kind of him. He doesn't even know what he's doing for me right now, which just makes it all so much more meaningful. Update 2. It's been 2 weeks since I found out about my dad's second family, and I still haven't done anything yet, but I might. And I might do whatever I have to do real soon, because after what I just found out, my blood is freaking boiling. I don't even know why I waited so long to do this, but I finally got around to doing some digging and stalking on social media to find out whatever I could about my dad's stepdaughter. Unfortunately, all her socials were private, so I had to ask my friend to lend me her account since she follows this woman. I was very confused to find out that this woman leads a much more luxurious lifestyle than I do, without even going to college. I didn't know what her job was, and since she didn't have a public account, she obviously wasn't an influencer or content creator of any sort. I couldn't figure out what her job was, so I decided to ask my friend about her, and she told me that apparently this woman doesn't have a real job. All she does is take vacations, go to expensive restaurants and clubs, and hang out with her friends. That's literally all she posts. And most people suspect that she can afford this only because she might have a side hustle we don't know about. But I know it's my dad who funds this lifestyle for her, because why would she need money from anywhere else when she has my dad to pay for whatever she wants? For my entire life, he kept preaching about the importance of money and told me not to be a spoiled brat just so that he could take all that money and hand it over to his stepdaughter. I don't even understand why he would do such a thing. It's sickening that he seems to care more about his other family than us. It was bad enough that he had a whole other family for so many years, but to find out that he'd even been treating them better than he'd been treating us was a different type of pain altogether. I can't bring myself to accept this at all, and I just feel so angry about everything. None of this is okay. I just want to break something right now, and that's how pissed off I am now. And I'm also worried because I know stress on this level isn't good for pregnant women. All I'd wanted was a happy pregnancy and a happy wedding, but none of this is going according to plan, and I hate it so much. My boyfriend is trying his best to be there for me, but there's only so much he can do. This isn't even his battle to fight, and yet he's going above and beyond to make sure I'm all right. At least I know that I'm with the right man. Update 3. I talked to my dad. I told him that not only was he going to pay for my child's education his entire life, but he was also going to pay for my health care during pregnancy and post-childbirth. And he was also going to come clean to my mother and take the best care of her to make sure she was all right during the divorce, and give up whatever she demanded in the settlement if a divorce was what she wanted now, that is. He was shocked when I said that to him, and obviously his first instinct was to say no. But then I reminded him that I could literally just expose him for what he'd been doing for the past 15 years, and then his reputation would be ruined. I didn't care what happened to him or his business after that. But if he wasn't going to do exactly what I asked of him, then I'd screw him over without even batting an eye, just what he'd done to me and Mom. We got into a bit of an argument after that, but eventually he realized that there was no way out of this and agreed to it. I'd been clever enough to lawyer up as well and had him sign all the documents to make sure he wouldn't go back on his word. He did sign it, and so a few days ago he finally confessed to my mother about the affair he'd been having, and even though she cried a lot and moved out immediately, she now knows that he'll have to give her whatever she demands if she decides to divorce him, which has been some consolation for her. She's decided to file for divorce and has been thinking about what exactly she can take away from him. I actually love this vengeful side of my mother, and I guess we'd all really underestimated her. She isn't as delicate or forgiving as we'd all thought she was. She's been living with us, but she said that she's going to move back into her old house and make sure my dad goes away instead, which definitely sounds like a plan, and I'm totally with her. If anyone should be leaving that house, it should be the person who cheated, and not the person who got cheated on. My dad and I haven't been in touch since, and I'm only going to text him when I need him to pay the bills. LOL. He's already doing it for his stepdaughter. Maybe it's about time he steps up as a father and does the same for his actual daughter. My boyfriend and I are also having the wedding that we'd always dreamt of, because now that all of our other expenses are covered, we can definitely afford to splurge a little. There are very few weeks to go for the wedding, and I don't think I've ever felt this excited in my entire life. I just hope it's all uphill from here now onwards. Stay tuned for more stories from Argo Relationships.